Hey, it's Joe Atwill with the fabulous Jan Irvin, who is under the weather a little bit, but heroically, he is manning the fort. How are you tonight, Jan?
Oh, I'm doing all right. You can tell I'm a little bit clogged up in the sinus area, but hanging in there.
You took an exciting trip back to New York.
I did lots of research that you and I discussed last week. I was actually broadcasting live from New York last week for the Breaking Woodstock episode. Yeah, I was that guy on the airplane who was sneezing the whole way home.
um, well, I thought that the show last week was very valuable, very useful information for people to recognize that you can place Woodstock in this context of cultural debasement, and that you can bring it all the way back to basically to Aleister Crowley, who's a good person to bring it back to because that's someone that the layperson can easily understand as a focus of evil. Um, and we've also talked specifically about the Grateful Dead. So tonight, in our covering of the counterculture. We're going to talk a little bit about the Doors and the famous rock group with Jim Morrison. Um, so Jan, the Doors, they came out of nowhere. I guess they didn't have much musical background when they became a rock and roll group. How did that happen?
Well, it's if I recall, it wasn't one of those another serendipitous just meeting of these guys one day, and the next day or within a week they had the band formed and had all the instruments and everything.
Right, and then of course, then when the album comes out, none of them can actually play their instruments at the time, but they just bring in the normal, studio musicians. They get the album covers shot, and then away you go. But the Doors, are really interesting for a number of reasons, and one is that Morrison claimed to be a shaman. That he had this shamanic experience where the spirit of a dead Indian came into his body. I just can barely say this stuff with a straight face. And then possessed him. Particularly, when you're a cynic about the Cultural Revolution and you hear these stories, it's like it's hard even to repeat them. But this is the story he told. Um, and then, you have to put this in the context that, well, the term shaman actually comes from Asia, and
Siberia, right?
Siberia, right? And this is where there were experiments done that are cited by Gregory Bateson as the place that basically the anthropology was developed that led to the counterculture.
Right, and the whole native revival thing
And the native revival
that
thing, right? And
David Price exposed in his work.
right. And so when you see Price's work and you see the native revival as just a weaponized piece of anthropology by Bateson, and then you look at this Morrison kid claiming to be infused with the spirit of an Indian, I mean, my God, it's just preposterous. And particularly given that, his dad was the admiral, naval intelligence individual, obviously. I mean, I don't know if he was OSS.
Well, sure. Well, and it gets even better than that, Joe, because the Doors had to be on the in to name their band The Doors, which was
Exactly.
named after the Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley, who is one of the key architects of MK Ultra.
Right. And
So,
see,
and just let me allow me really quickly to thank Frank for sending this book. And he had sent me a quote, and then to verify the quote, he had also sent me a copy of the book because neither of us had a copy on hand. But anyway, I do want to get to a quote that's in this book sometime during the show too.
right. In fact, let's just briefly go into Morrison's background and how suspicious it is. And then let's go straight to the quote. But so Morrison's father was the admiral, Annapolis,
Admiral George Stephen Morrison.
right, who was in charge of the Gulf of Tonkin fleet. Now, this
Right.
is critical
Well, he was, he was in charge of the entire carrier fleet, actually.
Right, and that carrier fleet is the one that executed the false flag uh, attack that then led to the Vietnam War. And so you can see that Admiral Morrison was very high up in the oligarchic secret society because he had been selected to oversee the introduction to the Vietnam War. And bear in mind that, you know, when you look at the weaponized anthropology, the sophisticated stuff, that is coupled with another blow that was delivered against the baby boomers, which was the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was just a literal way to depopulate this group, and of course to create post-traumatic syndrome, and also to addict them to drugs. Because as anyone who knows someone who returned from the war can attest, everyone was given drugs during the Vietnam War. I mean, there was marijuana, opium, meds. I mean, there was just, you know, a cornucopia of
Yeah, that was pretty much the first war that there was that many drugs available.
right, exactly. And so this, when you look at the you know, the activity of Gregory Bateson and the Grateful Dead working the other side, working the peace and love side, where they're giving away
Typical dialectic.
yeah, exactly, giving away LSD. And then on the other side, you have the war groups, you know. But you know, this is just very telling about Morrison, because obviously, when you look at the other individuals that are referenced by Dave McGowan in his great book, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, you can see that he detected a very clear pattern that the sons of people who were in military intelligence, or daughters, were then this first generation of the folk rock individuals, the ones who would, you know, like David Crosby, who'd wear the buckskin fringe. You know, they were just the beginning of this archaic revival, or wear Indian drab, or, for example, they would wear the freak gab that Sue Palakis, you know, had invented. So,
Well, and that actually goes back. Now we see to the Mavericks and the Whole House and the Birdcliff thing at
right.
Woodstock. So now we have the you know, connection there as well.
Yeah, I mean, crazy clothes is just a way to move people away from their normative culture,
Right.
and to put them in a mood to do what thou wilt. You know, this all, at least in the show we did yesterday, we showed that, look, there was
Last week. Right.
last week, Jim, there was a direct connection between Aleister Crowley's philosophy, which was developed as part of a program of cultural debasement, and what becomes the Woodstock music festival. There's an absolutely straight line connection that the group that was putting on the performances at Woodstock in the 1920s and having this crazy garb had the Crowley's philosophy as their creed. And then when you go forward and you look at the same clothes being exhibited and the same philosophy, and then you're in combination with all the drugs, and you can see this is this vast program. It's very similar, Jan, to the vast multi-generational program that we show existed between Edward Bernays and the counterculture. In other words, it's almost that long.
By Wasson, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. It's just this very long-standing program, multi-generation of nefarious activity by people. So that's why Morrison's, his father's role in this is so revealing. It's almost as revealing as his claim that, he was actually a shaman. It sets him up as someone who is really likely, a member of the secret society, a lifetime actor.
Sure.
That was given the role of rock idol.
Right. Well, not only that, but, one of Jim Morrison's album covers, which I've showed in one of the past videos, I think in the Music Mind Control series with Hans Utter, but that Jim Morrison even took on the persona of the Dionysian Mysteries.
Right.
But
right.
he was heavily influenced by Aleister Crowley, yeah. And The Doors is named after Aldous Huxley's book, The Doors of Perception. Aldous Huxley and Crowley knew each other, and they were both intel. Morrison was intel, but all of these people and events are so closely related, and there's a possible relation between Jim Morrison and Charles Manson as well.
Right. And what really made me want to, have a show where we kind of brought out more information about Morrison to the public is the quote that you showed me that comes from that book. Are you able to give us that quote? Because I just thought
Sure.
that was extraordinary.
Let's give it a shot here. Y'all get the nasally version tonight.
Your voice sounds great, Jan.
All right. So, and this is page 89 from The Lords and the New Creatures by Jim Morrison. All right, page 89, The Lords. Events take place beyond our knowledge or control. Our lives are lived for us. We can only try to enslave others, but gradually special perceptions are being developed. The idea of the Lords is beginning to form in some minds. We should enlist them into bands of perceivers to tour the labyrinth during their mysterious nocturnal appearances. The Lords have secret entrances and they know disguises, but they give themselves away in minor ways. Too much glint of light in the eye, a wrong gesture, too long a curious glance. The Lords appease us with images. They give us books, concerts, galleries, shows, cinemas, especially the cinemas. Through art, they confuse us and blind us to our enslavement. Art adorns our prison walls, keeps us silent and diverted and indifferent.
Yeah, well, that's just about as clear a description of the secret society and its goal of enslavement without the population knowing it as is imaginable. And he even includes nice little details like the Lords are visible by the light that comes from them. I mean, this is like a little Illuminati, quip. There's a picture of Morrison in his house in Laurel Canyon with, a gaily decorated sun, this kind of Illuminati symbol. I mean, his father was a specialist in New Testament Greek and knew the Gospels really well. I am positive that his father was from the Freemason lineage of the secret society, because when you look at Salinger and Catcher in the Rye, he goes into the Gospels, and I won't go into the actual typology, but he explains the typology in the Gospels using Holden Caulfield's talking about it, and it shows that the Freemasons, because Holden Caulfield is clearly representing the Freemasons, have this very deep understanding of the real truth behind Christianity. And so when Morrison died, presumably, I'm one of those that don't think he actually passed away, but when he left the stage.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
Right. When he left the stage, he was buried in this plot, or something was buried in the plot in Paris. And then there was a tombstone erected by his father. And it said what he did because of his own demon. And this expression of demon, he used the precise word that the demon is how it's characterized in the Gospels. And then here, to really kind of understand what's going on, you have to know that the Freemasons basically, hate Roman Catholicism, hate the Christian world, and have sworn an oath to destroy it. And so when he praises his son by doing what he did because of his own demon, he's really making a little quip, because see, to this group, the demon represents the good guy. In other words, they're using they're reversing the use of the term in the Gospels. And I know this is a little complicated, so people that are confused by this, I would recommend Caesar's Messiah just to clear it all up. But but basically the Gospels is a kind of Roman humor. And when the character Jesus Christ is talking about demon, he's really talking about rebellious Jews. This was a war that was being fought between Rome and a real Messianic movement. And so the demon, the demonic spirit, this is all this warrior group of Jews. And that's what Morrison's father is referring to. So in other words, he isn't characterizing his son as troubled and full of demons. No, he's actually praising his son. He's saying his son had this kind of warrior tradition that he was following. So that quote is just another one of the fingerprints of the oligarchs in my mind, because it's
that's really well put.
I mean, you just don't have any way to explain his understanding, right? This very, if you think about the quote, it's a very long and complicated description of the both the activities and the systems and all of the way that the secret society operates. And it's just too complicated to be circumstantial. So it shows that Morrison was on the inside and basically was a lifetime actor whose role was to get people to be interested in taking LSD.
Well said. Well, the database is having trouble updating today, so I think the servers are overwhelmed. So anyway, people can also look up George Morrison and the Brain database on the Gnostic Media website. Just click on the Brain link up above, and there is the web version up there. And I do have Jim Morrison mapped out in there. In fact, I'll show mine on screen here while we're going here. See if we can get to it that way at least. But what I also wanted to do, Joe, was read and I just closed it. I wanted to get into the quote by Edward Bernays, because it parallels so quickly, or so closely, excuse me, the quote by Jim Morrison. So in my article, Manufacturing the Deadhead,
yeah,
is that quote there. And it says, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is the logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes of the processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. And, we can see parallel themes there. Morrison is talking about the lords. Edward Bernays is talking about how it's them.
It's an incredibly apt parallel, Jan. It's fantastic. Once you can place Bernays inside the secret society, and once you understand Morrison's father's role in the Gulf of Tonkin, you can't help but look at Bernays's little cryptic aside, where he's actually bragging about how they're able to enslave people without their knowing it, and then not be able to see the same ideas coming out of Morrison's quote. And I would also note that when Morrison was working on that, he was in Laurel Canyon, as I understand it. And he certainly lived in Laurel Canyon and was there during the beginning parts of the Doors' career. And Laurel Canyon, of course, is the home of the secret government project that was developing films and special effects. If you look at, I think it was called the Overlook, or there was some name for that project, but which escapes me now. But the it was certainly, it was inside Laurel Canyon. In other words, when Morrison talks about the cinema, how the cinema is very powerful in controlling people, Jan, he's only a mile away from the site that had every special effects
Well,
person.
right there in Laurel Canyon. Well,
Right.
Joe, what have I,
You know?
even last February, I called you from Princeton and you and I were talking. I said, Joe, I think the CIA is like the Central Entertainment Agency.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it, because basically it appears as though Hollywood is just an extension of it.
Right, exactly. Very much so. I mean, of course, they're going to do some of their black ops and this type of stuff too, but I think the majority of what the Central Intelligence Agency does is manipulation of the public mind.
Yeah, I don't think that the black ops are really that serious. I think that the public is sold just a complete bill of goods about that.
Right.
That
I
really
think so
what
too.
the CIA is doing is studying us and thinking about how to
Sure. Well,
us.
who makes all of the movies about what the CIA does, but the CIA? So then, of course, they're always running around the world and stopping a terrorist here or doing a black op there and all this kind of stuff. But when you get into see what the bulk of the work that the CIA really does is about social relations and just public perception, then it changes everything. And then you realize all of these movies and things that most people get the idea of what they think the CIA is created by the CIA. They don't want you to know that they wear tie dye and that they're the big famous hippies like Leary and Aldous Huxley and all these guys that are CIA and MI6. They want you to think that the
Yeah,
CIA are mostly guys that go around in black suits.
they don't want you to know the effect that they control culture. And that's why I think the most important document in Western civilization is the pay requisition from Gordon Wasson for his trip to Mexico to begin the magic mushroom and the psychedelic revolution. The pay requisition from the MK Ultra CIA's program.
All right, let me see if I can find it here.
Because that document shows, I mean, it just is incontrovertible evidence that the CIA is mucking around inside a culture and with malevolence. They're not creating the psychedelic movement because they want to help people, ascend to a higher spiritual plane. I mean, this is just raw debasement, you know. And it also, that document that Jan is highlighting, and I hope every world citizen reads this. I just hope every single person that watches this show, if you do nothing else, you just read this document, because it proves that the CIA was involved in cultural debasement. And this puts a new light on every single so-called historical event that we have encountered in the last 50 years. It just shows that there is a society. It has enormous control inside of government, and it's malevolent as hell. So this is not a conjecture. It's not something that is produced by logic. Folks, it's just the bloody pay requisition. It just shows that the whole project that Life magazine was involved with was from the CIA.
Yep.
So,
And here's the approval of the funds. Here's another letter of Alan Dulles that Alan Dulles wrote to Gordon Wasson.
yeah.
I actually got that directly from the CIA, but from a FOIA request I did several years back. But a lot of this information, such as in this letter here, I had to piece a lot of this together, but we figured out that it was Roger Heim, the leading French mycologist, the director of the Muséum National de Histoire de Nationale in France. And then just when, somebody was here and I was showing them all of the documents, and it says I'm leaving for a trip too, and it was redacted right there. So I just went into my archive of Wasson documents for the weeks following up right before February 8, and Wasson says in one of the letters just days before this one that he was leaving to Europe at the end of March. So it was, really simple to fill in a lot of this stuff that the CIA had redacted, but it was also easy to tell that it was originally on Wasson's J.P. Morgan letterhead, and
Right.
that they had redacted the top of the letterhead as well.
Well, it's like when you asked Colin Ross about this document, and he just said there is absolutely no question that this is correct.
Right.
Yeah, they redacted
Yeah.
the name, but
Well,
Wasson,
there are a number of trolls who are going around still trying to distort, but Wasson was the only one. He says, "I am planning a fourth expedition to the mountains of and then it's redacted Oaxaca region of Mexico for July. Only Wasson had gone on 4 prior trips. James Moore hadn't gone on 4 prior trips. And the official story is that it was James Moore who was a part of the team, who was also CIA. But the official story is that it was James Moore who infiltrated the team,
right?
and that nobody else was CIA. But we see Roger Haim, a part of the French MK Ultra stuff going on. We see Wasson heading MK Ultra Subproject 58. We see him talking about the concerning equipment and personnel of our expedition. Well, if you look up the word personnel, deals with people that work for the government. And
Yeah,
so,
and it's also that he says the redacted individual, which was obviously Wasson, says that this is his 4th trip into the mountains.
right, absolutely.
Right.
But and then the dead giveaway is that the whole team is personnel, and I do believe that Albert Hoffman was on this particular trip as well. But Albert Hoffman had gone on several of the trips with this very team, and then we have, basically what they did was they had a doctor who was Valentina Wasson's wife, and then their daughter, and then you had Alan Richardson, who was the cameraman. You had Roger Haim, who was the professional mycologist. You had James Moore, who was the scientist. So what you're looking at is a whole exploratory team put together, and that Wasson is writing there, getting the $2,000 from the Geschichter Fund for this trip. And the official story again is that Dr. James Moore infiltrated them, but this proves that that's all false. And then obviously in the CIA's official documents, it says in there that J.P. Morgan Bank was part of MK Ultra Subproject 58. And then this letter here is the official approval of MK Ultra Subproject 58 by the CIA. But we've mapped out all of this stuff, and it's just very clear that it is Wasson who is working with the CIA and doing all of this stuff. But it's also Wasson, going back to something you said earlier, it's also Wasson who wrote the book Soma, Divine Mushroom of Immortality, that essentially popularized the Siberian word shaman in Western culture.
Right, and so it's a very closely knit group. And of course, getting back to Jim Morrison, Bernays was a friend of Wasson, an actual colleague of him who worked with him, and who wrote glowing reports about Wasson. It wasn't just some kind of academic relationship. They were very close. We showed that that there was just overwhelming parallelism between Bernays's comments on how propaganda works and Jim Morrison's cryptic description of the lords that control society through the cinema, etc. But I want to then go on and show how this connection then is reflected in Morrison's lyrics. And so, Jan, would you mind letting go of the screen for a second so I can go into the Word document that I have? Thank you. I'm just going to, Morrison, probably his most famous song, perhaps Light My Fire, but I would think this would be the most famous song. It's The End. And I would suggest that the right way to understand it is as a description of a coming apocalypse. And I think that if you kind of look at the lyrics, it's really not too particularly difficult to understand. He talks about that this is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end of our elaborate plans, right? The end of the elaborate plans. Well, I mean, if you're trying to work an apocalypse, it's an elaborate plan. And I would say that the group that Morrison is involved with is trying to work an apocalypse. So this all makes sense. There's no safety or surprise, right? It's a plan. And of course, I'll never look into your eyes again. So, this is kind of, vaguely conjuring up images of death. But then the next line, it says, can you picture what will be so limitless and free? Well, somehow, you can see that this might be a way of looking at death, but it could also be a way of looking at the world after it had been conquered, after the populations that, you want to remove are gone. And so, he talks about, they're desperately in need of some stranger's hand in a desperate land. And he says, lost in a Roman wilderness of pain. A Roman wilderness of pain. My.
And for anybody who's read Joe's work, that's just a dead giveaway right there.
Right. I mean, so now who Morrison is and what he's reflecting. He's an operation against the Romans. He is like
who they consider all Gentiles, essentially.
Exactly. And they want to get them off the planet. And then he goes on and says, all the children are insane. All the children are insane. Well, yes. Thank you, Jim. You've worked to bring this about. The children are insane. They've been taking LSD. They've been given lies for history.
They've been listening to the Doors music.
They've been listening to this insane rock and roll music that you play. So that is the case that, the kids are insane. Now, Morrison goes on and he talks about riding a snake. And the snake is just a symbol of the apocalypse. It's the great reptile that is,
Well, it's also the symbol of the fall, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, but of course, but again, I think he's in the context of the Book of Revelation. He goes to the lake. Now, this is the ancient lake, baby. That's the lake where the beast is supposed to be. It's in the Book of Revelation. The snake is long, 7 miles long. I mean, that's, the number 7 in the Book of Revelation is just everywhere. And of course, it's just that is just mocking the association of the number 7. I'm talking about the Book of Revelation now, with the ancient Hebraic texts and the way that they use 7. So, Morrison goes on, ride the snake, he's old and the skin is cold. Well, he's just goofing off of the Book of Revelation. And then, he says, driver, where have you taken us? But now you see he transitions. And this is what's really important, is that, he goes into the Oedipal complex and he talks about a young man who kills his father and has sex with his mother, right?
Right.
He represents the Oedipal complex. Now,
which we covered that in Manufacturing
right,
the Dead.
and we covered it. Now, this is, according to the Freudian theory, the ultimate sublimated component of a civilized person, right? According to that theory, you have to sublimate these urges. And yet here, Morrison not only, is aware of the Freudian idea, but he puts it out without any moral context, right? There's no condemning of it. The way that what you're seeing here, Jan, when he talks about he went down the room where his sister lived and then he, blank, he paid a visit to his brother and then he, walked down the hall and he came to a door and looked inside. Father.
Yes, son.
I want to kill you. Thank you.
Mother, I want to.
And then you get this scream, And so the scream is a way to unleash the libido. You see, it's like primal therapy.
Right.
What the listener,
the primal scream.
Exactly. What the listener is supposed to do is to have the Oedipal repression inside of him basically reduced by listening to Morrison's song. You know, there's no moral context. You've got this scream. The listener should associate with it, and then and if nothing else, it's just an homage to violence and an incest. So this is there's no moral uplifting or artistic context for this. I mean, folks, this is just raw debasing propaganda. You know, for God's sakes, don't hold up this character Morrison.
You know, and how many times have we seen these guys using this exact same theme and these exact same ideas to do this stuff? We see it in the Beatles, we see it in the
exactly
Rolling Stones, we see it in the Doors, and in in Catcher in the Rye and Huxley's work all over the place.
Exactly right. So they it's a kind of neurolinguistic programming. It's weaponized anthropology.
Well, and it's almost disgusting brag rights, isn't it?
Exactly right. I mean, they're basing bragging its legacy. You know, they're saying, look,
you're so dumb, we're going to put it in your face and you won't notice it.
Right in your face. It's sort of like that.
You're going to sing it along.
You know, that line from the Coen brothers about, I never thought we would see kids with bones through their noses. And
right. Let me see if I can find that.
Right. It's not the one thing. It's all of these little things that make up cultural debasement, you know. But a couple points. One, whenever Morrison is characterized as a poet, this individual who's making the claim should be shouted down by the people that really want to have a sustaining civilization, because believe me, the author of the end knows what he's doing. This isn't circumstance. You don't blend the apocalypse with Freudianism accidentally. That combination is coming right out of the group that Salinger is a part of, and Aleister Crowley. I mean, this is just obvious.
Let me read this quote from our article, Manufacturing the Deadhead. This is from the Coen brothers film No Country for Old Men. Ellis, if you'd have told me 20 years ago that I'd see children walking in the streets of our Texas towns with green hair, bones in their noses, I just flat out wouldn't have believed you. Bell, Signs and Wonders. Ellis, but I think once you quit hearing sir and ma'am, the rest is soon to follow. Bell, oh, it's the tide. Ellis, it's the dismal tide. It's not the one thing. Bell, not the one thing.
Right. And so, inside that little, dialogue, you can see, first of all, Signs and Wonders. It's a reference to the Bible. What they're talking about is, again, it's just the triumphant crowing of having debased an entire culture. This is what they intended to do. This is what can be seen every step of the way, in every enormous cultural event. You can see in back of it was this plan, this weaponized anthropology. You can see it in the Coen brothers films, and you can certainly see it here in Morrison's song. You get this combination of neurolinguistic programming to do the cultural debasement,
right,
and the threat of the coming apocalypse. Morrison goes on and he says, it hurts to set you free, but you'll never follow me. Right. Well, you can see, okay, he's sad about having to slaughter everyone. This is like, the I Am the Walrus, where they're crying because there's no more oysters to eat. It hurts.
Right.
I'm very sad about it, but you'll never follow me. Right. And so this is the end. It's cryptic. He doesn't come out and say, exactly what's in back of it. But notice that when he says, doing a blue rock on a blue bus, and of course, we know blue is an interesting symbolic color of some individuals, but he then goes on and he says, kill, 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 kill. Right. This is just like basically he's quoting Shakespeare. Kill, 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 kill. This is the end. See, there's no moral context. There's no basically saying killing is bad. It's just like his characterization of the Oedipal complex. He's not saying having sex with your mother and killing your father is bad. There's an issue of civilization here. He is just the opposite. He is
Well, it's actually going into the subliminal messages that Hans Utter and I talked about in our series, where they're implanting the idea into children's minds, and not all of them are going to do it, but to go and kill your parents.
exactly right. And so now you combine that with the fact that the people who are listening to this rubbish are on LSD.
Right. Well, very, and which, again, we have referred many times to my article in Thujan's What's in a Name, and we can see in that article that the primary purpose for these substances is to create hypersuggestion. So you're high on LSD, listening to the Doors record, album, CD, whatever, and this is what they're attempting to implant the program into your brain.
It's really, this is he just wants violence, and he's saying, it's the end of the soft lies, and that's the meaning the lifetime actor, the lifetime acting, the portraying of being a rock and roll star for the idea of developing trust and the power of identification with his from the young followers, so that when he says kill, 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 or talks about having sex with his mother, then somehow these ideas have pressure, to come forward and manifest in the consciousness. They're being released from, their place that they've been restrained by the structures of civilization, and so this is, it's pretty sad stuff, but if people are aware of it, they can, make changes. I mean, for one thing, I would say to the same thing as when you come across Catcher in the Rye, you don't let children read it. You don't let teenagers read it. The book is an anthropological weapon, and so you just keep it away from kids, and of course expose it, talk about it, bring it up to your school boards. Say, here's the analysis of Catcher in the Rye. Here's the neurolinguistic programming promoting pedophilia. This isn't a good idea for our kids to be listening to it. Music stations, radio stations that play this kind of stuff from the Doors, they should be sued in court. They should be sued for the psychological damage. They try to hide behind the freedom of speech, but this isn't freedom of speech. This is an anthropologic weapon. This is done to hurt people. They're not trying to express ideas. They're
right. That's absolutely true.
Minds of the individuals that are listening.
And that's what they've hidden behind all of these years is free speech, so that they could do all of this damage.
Yeah. So anyway, it's time that the music of the 60s and 70s was exposed for what it is, and I wanted to compliment you and Hans, who was on our show a month ago, for the series that you did. Anyone who hasn't listened to it, I would hope they would go there and do so, because it really gives them, a lot of important data about the music, about how the music was, designed to hurt us.
And that's Music, Mind Control, and Psychobiology. That's a 7-part series with Hans. And Hans may be back on my show again sometime this weekend or next week to record part 2 of The Secret History of FM Radio.
Great. And are we ever going to have David Osprey on UnSpun, Jan?
We are supposed to have him on sometime soon. I think we had gotten a date from his publicist. I have him down for Tuesday, the 8th.
Of March?
Of March, correct.
Right. Well, that'll be a show that'll be very interesting. I think we want to focus a little bit on diet in the coming shows, because that's another important
absolutely
element of the
and Dave has really been the one for me who laid out so much of the core material to, I was in and out of hospitals for 15 years suffering from something I picked up when I lived in Europe when the U.S. bombed Serbia, as well as grains and the low-fat vegan diet and all of the havoc that wrecked on me. And so, I had been working on things and gotten most of it solved. And then Dave is really who helped me piece the last of it together.
Right. And I also wanted to mention, how concerned I am for the people of Fiji. I was actually intending to go there for a month. I would have been doing all of these shows via, Skype from Fiji. I have a friend there that I was going to visit, among other things. And I just before this show started, I got an email from him, Lauren Huff. And if Lauren is listening, or I doubt if he's listening, but if he hears this, I just wanted to congratulate him for coming through the most powerful cyclone in the history of the Southern Pacific. They had 200-mile-an-hour winds that went ashore, and there were many, many lives. And I'm very, want to express my concern for the people of Fiji. I had actually have been in communication with quite a few of them, and there was a lot of research that I wanted to do when I was there, and now that's all been put aside. So anyway, it's a sad day, but I am extremely happy that Lauren has come through. I got the email saying he's okay. So wherever you are, Lauren, just keep safe. It should all be good from here on out.
Now, let's see here. Do we want to try and take a few calls or a call maybe or two from the audience before we wrap up this episode,
Yeah,
Joe?
that might be fun. If anyone is actually, we've never done this on UnSpun, but I just, we should try it.
Yeah, we want to try it, and there's, and on the Gnostic Media website for the Unspun show are the phone numbers, but it's 408 638 0968, and that's U.S. Again, that's 408 638 0968. And then there's another number here, 646-558-8656. Those are both U.S. And then you're going to need the meeting ID number 997-869-851. Once again, 997-869-851. So
that's
here's
a lot of work to call in.
It does seem like a lot of a lot of effort there.
To try it is I'd had a number of emails from people saying that they wanted to actually ask particular questions, and and I wanted to let everyone know, hey, we're not avoiding questions. We're happy to take them. And so please.
Well, Joe,
Yeah.
we don't interact with the public.
Well, anyway, we're always happy to take questions, and I also wanted to extend the invitation one more time to
Zane.
To Zane.
What happened to Zane when you were emailing with him?
Well, we were exchanging information in our Facebook pages, and I tried to be very polite and ask him to come on the show, and I said, I tried to make sure he knew it'd be respectful, and he just dropped out of the conversation. I don't know. I think that anyone who listens to our show who's in communication with him, we would be happy to come on to his forum. I know that perhaps he would be think it would be an adverse situation where we would control the venue, and so he couldn't get a word in edgewise, and so I was thinking that perhaps the right invitation would be, we would be happy, either one of us or both of us, to come on his show,
sure,
and have a discussion, if that would be clarifying, because it's really time to bring out the truth about the counterculture. And it's real. The time has come. There is enough evidence out there. I wanted to reference something, Jan. I was reading it was a story, or it was in the mainstream media. I forget the magazine. I'll have to find it up, but this just came to mind. I wasn't anticipating mentioning this, but it's timely. And so I was reading this article in mainstream media. It was some magazine, I know the name of it was, can't recall it, but it was I remember being shocked because it was a mainstream media. And in the article, they were talking about Gordon Wasson, and they said, sad thing is, it turns out that Gordon Wasson was actually paid by MK Ultra. I mean, so that the information that you brought out has now actually reached down to the extent.
Well, I'm going to grab something from the other room really quickly and follow that thought, because I want to show the audience something that was that just came out this week. I just got a copy of it yesterday. Okay, well, go ahead. I'm just going to point out that so you're starting to see the cracking, in the dam of information. And the facts about Gordon Wasson are the very correct way to introduce the subject into the mainstream media. You want to start bringing up the fact that he was an MK Ultra employee, and that the whole trip that Life magazine wrote the article about was an MK Ultra project, because that just opens up the Pandora's box. Now, this is a brand new book that just came out. I just received a copy of it yesterday, and the author did come up and meet me a couple of years ago, but there is a section in here. I don't remember what page it was on, but discussing Jan Irvin's revisal of psychedelic history, essentially. But there's I don't know, I guess I could find it in the index and read a little bit or something. But yeah, go ahead, man. I'd love to hear that, actually, if you don't mind. Let's see here if I can find it. I hate to put you on the spot. I know it's hard to do this, in real time, but well, it's hard to do it when your head's all stuffed up. That's the main issue. It's hard to do anything when your head's stuffed up. All right, so let's see. Here we go. First, I got to find the index, and then the rest of it. All right, so I think it's page 439 here. So, and he does represent most of the work accurately. He does say a couple things that I disagree with, that he's raising there. But it says Jan Irvin's revision of modern psychedelic history. As noted earlier, in The Holy Mushroom, author and ethnomycology researcher Jan Irvin sought to unravel the attacks launched against John Allegro by Gordon Wasson. Since the book's publication in 2008, Irvin has continued to investigate other untold legacies of Wasson, often treading where no researcher has gone before him. Irvin's investigation, built largely on primary documents directly written by or to Wasson, has since shed light on numerous secrets of this ethnomycological legend. And interestingly, the word legend is often used for intelligence officers. By gathering letters from the personal archives of public figures associated with Wasson, as well as documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act requests to the CIA and other government agencies, Irvin has been able to essentially fill in the unwritten biography of Gordon Wasson. Among many discoveries, Irvin has found that Wasson knowingly participated in significant academic fraud during his writing of the Hall Carbine affair. Wasson secretly worked with an academic historian, and that was Alan Nevins, and the famous one from Yale. I'm forgetting the name. It's in the first article in the series. Andrews, in an artificial version of history that covered up the reality that J.P. Morgan Bank did in fact gain its initial fortune by swindling the U.S. government with faulty rifles. Wasson plagiarized many of his ideas in Soma from an 1892 book on scatology by John G. Bork, in which Bork dedicates more than 30 pages to the ritualistic mushroom use, including Amanita muscaria urine drinking customs in Siberia and Mexican mushroom practices. At J.P. Morgan, Wasson managed the account for the Pope and the Vatican. Wasson served as chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations and was heavily involved in the Century Club, an elite organization attended by many powerful public and military figures. Wasson was close friends with Allen Dulles, head of the CIA, and had many ties with many high-ranking military officials. It was Wasson and not James Moore, and we just discussed this a little bit ago, who requested the $2,000 grant from the CIA to help fund psychoactive mushroom research in Mexico. And so you want me to go on from there? There's a little more here.
Yeah, go ahead. This is actually kind of cool. We only have a few minutes anyway, so
all right. He continues, and by the way, I don't know if I said this book is Radical Mycology by Peter McCoy, and it's a big, fat 600-page sucker. But he continues on. In other words, Wasson was not simply a banker turned amateur mycologist, as is often presented. Rather, the man held significant power and influence among many powerful figures around the world and worked directly with the CIA during his trips to Mexico. When Irvin first presented his research to the psychedelic community in 2012, he was immediately ridiculed for contradicting over 50 years of popularly accepted history. In short time, Irvin was ostracized from the psychedelic research community that he had been heavily involved in for 20 years for nothing more than disproving popular beliefs with documented evidence. Psychedelic advocates continue to criticize Irvin's work for the controversy it evokes, even though, as Irvin claims, none of these critics have ever looked at the primary documentation underlying the research, nor have any of Irvin's claims been disproven. When I first heard of Irvin's work, I was surprised to hear such a contradictory account of the contemporary history of psychoactive fungi. But considering the profound implications that such claims hold in relation to any discussion for integrating psychoactive fungi into theories on social change, I decided not to dismiss them outright, but to investigate their validity so as to decide for myself. In early 2014, I contacted Irvin to see if he would be willing to review a synopsis of his research that I had written for Radical Mycology. I told Irvin I wanted to offer the reader an unbiased account of the commonly presented history of Wasson's work alongside Irvin's version so as to let the reader decide which was more accurate. Irvin responded that due to his conviction that his research's integrity, he would rather offer me access to his home and research documents in Southern California so that he could most clearly explain his findings. So in June of 2014, I traveled to the hills outside of Los Angeles to see the documents on Wasson that Irvin had diligently accumulated over the previous 8 years. Throughout an entire day together, Irvin walked me through the string of evidence showing me the documentation of Wasson's elite affiliations, letters directly from Wasson to the CIA, Allen Dulles, and even a letter in which Wasson bragged about deceiving the general population. In the end, I had to conclude that the above claims Irvin made about Wasson were true and that the entire foundation of psychedelic subculture I had vigorously engaged in throughout my life was now called into question.
We got to stop right there, Jan, because the show's all up. Just want to thank you for coming out and you weren't feeling well. If anyone is interested, go to CaesarsMessiah.com, postflaviana.org. I have a donate button up now, finally, for those who are dying. Give me money. And buy the books. Jan, you want to tell people how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, gnosticmedia.com. There's the contact form on the front page of the website or directly at contact@gnosticmedia.com. I still have front site memberships available for those who donate $250 or more. Really appreciate your help and support. Also, I need to get back to Woodstock as soon as possible to get some more research done for a project I'm planning on for all of that as well. So your support and financial assistance is greatly appreciated. And I suppose that's about a wrap.
See you next week, Jan. Bye, everybody.
See you, Joe. See everyone next week. Take care.
Thank you for tuning into CCN. This unique network is dedicated to free and independent media. CCN was created with the belief that information is the common heritage of all beings, which is why our live stream high-definition broadcast is easily accessible and free to view. If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Having produced over 1,000 shows in 2015, which are all archived on YouTube, We look forward to bringing you more groundbreaking, cutting-edge information in 2016. For more information on what is on, please check out our broadcast guide for weekly updates. CCN broadcasts in multiple languages and features some key voices of our challenging times who are all in pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world. CCN belongs to you, the people, and it is up to you all to keep this network on the air. Please contribute to the Network Support Fund or visit the CCN shop. We thank you all for supporting free and independent media.